ಸಂಸಾರದಾವ ನಲಲಿಡಲೋಕ ತ್ರಾಣಾಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣತ್ವಂ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣರ್ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ಮಹಾಪ್ರಭೋ ಕೀರ್ತನ ನಿತ್ಯ ಗೀತಾ ವಾದಿತ್ರ ಮಾದ್ಯಾನ್ ಮನಸೋರಸೇನಾ ರೋಮಾಂಚಕಂಪಾ ಶ್ರುತರಂಗಬಾಜೋ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ಶ್ರೀ ವಿಗ್ರಹಾರಾಧನ ನಿತ್ಯಾನಾನಾ ಶೃಂಗಾರತಾನ್ ಮಂದಿರಮಜನಾದೋ ಯುಕ್ತಸ್ಯ ಭಕ್ತಾಂ ಚ ನಿಯುಂಜತೋಪಿ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ಚತುರ್ವಿಧ ಶ್ರೀ ಭಗವತ್ ಪ್ರಸಾದ ಸ್ವಾದಾನ ತೃಪ್ತಾನ್ ಹರಿಭಕ್ತ ಸಂಗಾನ್ कृतैव तृप्तिं भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जायुनो रतिकेलिसिद्ध्यै यायालिभियुक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभास्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दम् साक्षादरित्वेन्दा समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तास्तथा भाव्यत एव साद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोजा प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायान् सुवासं तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् 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 नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपेस्ताय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु ನಿತ್ಯಾನಂದ ಶ್ರೀ ಅದ್ವೈತ ಗದಾಧರ ಶಿವಸದಿ ಗೌರ ಭಕ್ತವೃಂದ Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. ಜಯ ರಾಧಾ ನೀಲ ಮಾಧವ ರಾಧಾ ನೀಲ ಮಾಧವ ರಾಧೆ जयो जगन्नाथा जयो बलदेवा जयो सुभद्रमा जयो सुदर्शना जयो सीताराम जयो सीताराम जयो सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो गौरनिताय जयो गौरनिताय जयो गौरनिताय जयो गौरनिताय जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा जयो प्रभुपदा जयो गुरुदेवा जयो गुरुदेवा जयो गुरुदेवा जयो गुरुदेवा निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेमी से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत दाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय श्री मायापुर धाम की जय श्री अयोध्या धाम की जय जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय गंगा मई की जय यमुना मई की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी देवी की जय समवेत भक्तवृंद की जय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल all glory to assembled devotees all glory to assembled devotees all glory to assembled devotees all glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga all glory to Shri Prabhupada ki jai
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वमक्षा शीलतङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बाहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरेणकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु भृंगा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव देव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंह जय जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय भक्ता प्रहलाद प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय महाराज जय प्रहलाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय 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 गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव देव जय जय गुरुदेव नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
नृसिंहदेव भगवान की जय प्रहलाद महाराज की वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः
वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः
वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः
वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः
वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः
वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः
वृंदा देवी तुलसी महारानी की
जय
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ये अभिलाषी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः ए तुम्हार शरण लोय तार वांछ पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हेरी बोसादा युगल रूप राशि हे निवेदन धारो सखीरानुगात करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी कोई ये जना मोरा होए श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नभासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
activities, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the God's holy name. 10. To not complete faith in chanting holy names and to maintain material attachments, even understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses. In order to quickly achieve desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just deities who can fulfill to everyone, and their full compassion fallen conditioned souls. Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Jeto Darpana Marjanam Pavamahadavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Patipatam Purnamita Sadhanam Sarvatmastapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranina Kalaha Etadishi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamapi Turudevami Disham Yaha Janina Nuragaha Turinatapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtanya Sada Harihi Na Thanam Na Janam Na Sundarin Kavitamba Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Pavata Bhaktir Haituki Toi Ai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Pavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthitaduri Satisham Vichintaya Nayanam Kaladashuru Daraya Vadanam Kadgada Rudaya Gira Pulaka Nichitam Mapurukada Tavanama Kahane Bhavishati Yuga Itam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Ashri Shava Padaratam Pinnastumam Adarshanam Marmhatam Karotuva Yatha tatha va vidathatu lampato mad prana nathastu sa eva naparaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and is stringing fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of Bhakti moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It enables the ocean transcendent bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all benediction human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have vested all transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules in chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness enabled to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate to have no attraction for them. We should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect others. In such a state of mind, one can chant holy name of the Lord constantly. O my Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Sahamarjananda Krishna, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow I fall into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death, and place me on Adam's lotus feet. O my Lord, while my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant the holy name, while my voice choke up, or hair my body stand and a recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling of separation, I'm considering a moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all awakened in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Shri Mangala Charanam prayers ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Gada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Desha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Daidaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shrupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruta Pasithanta Dwanta Harine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Saksha Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namane Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virabhava Bhumistvam Nirtishta Sajanapriya Vaishnava Sava Bhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patidanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishin Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karna Sindho Dinapantho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Srato Pangor Mamamanda Materkati Masarvasa Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyat Vindaranya Kalpajumadaha Shimadra Nagara Singhasanasto Shimadradha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtalipi Sevamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vata Tatastita Karasham Venu Sanergo Pir Gopinatha Shiyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Panamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Tata Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Brahma Samhita Prayers Ki Jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadya Radya Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Satma Sukaupaviksha Lakshariteshu Surabhira Pipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Sampramasevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Venum Kavanantam Aravinda Dalayadaksham Parharvatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Gandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shubham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Alola Chantaka Lasa Vanamala Vamshi Ranankadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tripanga Lalitam Yata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Anganyasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chimmaya Satu Chala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Advaitam Achotam Anadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durapam Adurapam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Pantastrakoti Shatavasra Sampragamil Vayurathapi Manaso Munipangavanan Sopiastiyat Prapadasimya Vichinta Tattve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Ekopya Sora Chayitum Jagatanta Kotim Ya Chakti Rasti Jagatanta Chayaya Danta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Yatva Pavitatiyo Manujastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahimasanayana Bhusha Sokaiyam Eva Nikama Patitaistu Vanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chimmaya Rasa Patipavitapi Tapi Eva Nijaruptaya Kalapi Goloka Eva Nivasatya Kilatama Bhutto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Prushta Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sranda Machintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Mutishu Kalanyamena Tishtam Nanavatara Makaro Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Bhavanma Pramam Yu Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme godhead. He has eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin and is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamasundara is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of the transcendental figure possesses in himself the full fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe, at one and at the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confident Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shamasundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion, tinged with salve of love.
Throw it away outside.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions.
Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribo. So yesterday I went to see a soft tissue expert, and he really knows what he's doing. He relieved my pain. I can't believe it. In one setting, in one treatment. Now it's not over. But that's only the first treatment.
Yeah, Haribo. It's a good sign.
It's a very good sign. He really knew what he was doing. He did some testing, and then he came up with a plan, and then he started the plan, and it relieved my pain for the first time.
Haribo.
So There are some people that really know what they're doing. Yeah. Okay, so I think we are on. I'm not sure, but I think we are on. I want to start with text. I want to start with text 6 again, and then we'll go to 7 and 8. All right, so let's do text 6, so somebody can read.
The translation: O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conception of my and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties.
Know
Purport.
anybody like this? That fits that description? You want to read it again?
O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings
Avaricious means being greedy.
on the perishable conceptions of my and mine. As long as they do not take
mine and mine. What? No. Of what?
my and
My
mine.
and mine. Yeah.
As long as
in other words, everything belongs to me. This is mine. So forth.
as long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties.
So you can see this, like if you watch kids playing in the kindergarten. Like one kid, he gets a hold of a little plastic shovel and a pail, and then another kid comes and tries to take it away from him because he wants to play with the shovel and the pail. You ever see anything like that?
Yeah.
So this is my and mine. When they get older, they're not fighting over a shovel and pail. They're fighting over a business or a property or a girlfriend or a business partner who's cheating, this thing, that thing. So you see, this is going on. It starts in childhood and it continues through the whole life. Okay, so read the purport.
One may question how one can always think of the Lord in regard to his name, fame, quality, etc. If one is embarrassed by thoughts of family affairs, everyone in the material world is full of thoughts about how to maintain his family, how to protect his wealth, how to keep pace with friends and relatives, etc.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, everyone does.
Go ahead.
Thus, he is always in fear and lamentation, trying to keep up with the status quo. In answer to this question,
Status quo.
Status quo.
Yeah, so that means they're trying. They see their neighbor just bought a brand new Tesla, and they say, "How did that idiot buy such a nice car?" Right. They say, "I'm going to get a bigger car than that." Right. Yeah. So you see, this type of consciousness of envy is everywhere. Go ahead.
In answer to this question, this verse spoken by Brahma is very appropriate. A pure devotee of the Lord never thinks of himself as the proprietor of his home. He surrenders everything unto the supreme control of the Lord, and thus he has no fear for maintaining his family or protecting the interests of his family.
You hear that? That's extreme. That answers some questions that were asked yesterday. Read it again.
Yeah. He surrenders everything unto the supreme control of the Lord.
He what? what?
He surrenders everything unto the supreme control of the Lord.
There you go. Surrenders everything unto the supreme control of God. Go ahead.
And thus he has no fear for maintaining his family or protecting the interest of his family.
Because he has complete faith in God.
Yeah.
And the proof that he has complete faith in God is he very strictly follows the regulative principles.
Yeah, there are a lot of examples, Maharaj, but it's very hard to follow for everybody, right? So Prabhupada is one
But
example.
it's harder not to follow, don't you see? When you don't follow, you're in trouble. When you follow, there's no trouble.
So I see there are two examples very close to me. Like Prabhupada is one and Santa Tukaram is one, which he never care about his family. I mean, not care means in the sense not materially caring about.
No,
He's
you're
always
talking about
struggling
his
in the
wife was
family
not
life.
his wife was not starving to death. Did he have children?
Tukaram has children and he's
Or
not
were,
earning
were they
anything.
starving?
Yeah, in the sense they don't get proper food 2 times actually. And his wife was always trying to
Are you
blame
sure?
him.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I think they were
I
struggling
don't
to get
think
the
you're
food.
sure about that.
I think in the at least the movie that we watched, he goes and he does some little work and there was some the people want to cheat him and then so they
That was his own brothers.
yeah. But then actually the Lord actually takes care by opulently supplying.
He doesn't accept. Even God tried to give him like so much grain, so much, he doesn't accept it. Because he said it's not.
He accepted it, but he gave it away.
Yeah.
I gave it away. He said because it's not mine, I cannot accept it.
No, but was his wife and kids, were they starving? No, they were not starving.
But they were not happy also.
No. The wife was not
material
happy.
the material
The
desires
wife
of
was not happy because she said, "Well, why are you giving it away?" Right. Yeah, I mean, he didn't make his kids starve. And his wife was not starving. She was never satisfied. So always criticizing him. And because she did that, when he went back to Godhead, she didn't go back to Godhead. At least not right away, because she was criticizing him all the time. You should study your own saints, Prabhu.
That is what actually.
I know more about Tukaram than you do. And I'm not Maharashtrian. Come on. Go ahead.
Because of this surrender, he no longer has any attraction for wealth. Even if there is
Okay,
attraction.
that's Tukaram.
Yeah.
No attraction for
Yeah,
wealth.
yeah. This perfectly fits for him. So, because of his surrender, he no longer has any attraction for wealth. Even if there is attraction for wealth, it is not for sense enjoyment, but for the service of the Lord. A pure devotee may be attracted to accumulating wealth just like an ordinary man. But the difference is that a devotee acquires money for the service of the Lord, whereas the ordinary man acquires money for his sense enjoyment. Thus, the acquisition of wealth by a devotee is not a source of anxieties, as is the case for a worldly man. And because a pure devotee accepts everything in the sense of serving the Lord, the poisonous teeth of accumulation of wealth are extracted.
The poisonous teeth of accumulation. So that's called a metaphor. By the way, we have a Tukaram here. You know what his name is? Dhananjaya. He's our local Tukaram. He's earning money. He's giving most of it to the temple.
Yeah.
So you have an example right here. Okay, go ahead.
If a snake has its poison removed and bites a man, there is no fatal effect.
Fatal effect.
Fatal effect. Similarly, Wealth accumulated in the cause of the Lord has no poisonous teeth, and the effect is not fatal.
Fatal,
Fatal.
not fatal. Fatal.
Fatal. A pure devotee is never entangled in material worldly affairs, even though he may remain in the world like an ordinary man.
Because he's giving everything to the Lord. Now, does that mean he suffers because he's giving everything to the Lord? No. The more he gives to the Lord, the more the Lord gives him. It's like Prabhupada. He comes with nothing, and when he's ready to leave, he's got a huge organization with millions and millions and millions of dollars.
So Maharaj, it's a very common question being asked or something. So, yes, so this, either say Tukaram or Prabhupada, so they got elevated, they got liberation, everything. But by doing this, their family members
No, that's
didn't
not
get
true.
anything.
That's not true. Prabhupada, he made sure his family had money. You read his biography, you'll see. He set aside money for his family. When he left, and then ISKCON was growing, he set aside money for his family. Now, one of his sons was not satisfied, so he sued ISKCON. And he said everything Prabhupada did belonged to the family. But ISKCON finally settled with him, I think for 40 lakhs, something like that. So they got money in two ways. One way, he set aside money for them, for maintenance of his wife and his family members. And then they got more money after they sued ISKCON, and they lost basically, but they made some settlement. So they did not suffer. You haven't read his biography, have you?
I read, but not.
Okay, you haven't read it, right? So I would go back and read it. You'll see he left money. Not only left money for his family, he left money for repairing damaged Vaishnava tirthas in Bengal. Now he didn't have to do that. That meant there were buildings that were in poor repair, that were important places like where different acharyas were born and things like that in Bengal. So he left the whole account just for repairing those places. You have to read his biography. You'll see. He was very generous, actually. Okay. So, therefore, it says here, and because a pure devotee accepts everything in the sense of serving the Lord, the poisonous teeth of accumulation of wealth are extracted. Whoa. In other words, you tear it out of your body and you throw it away. If a snake has its poison removed and bites a man, there's no fatal effect. Similarly, when wealth accumulated in the cause of the Lord has no poisonous teeth, and the effect is not fatal. A pure devotee is never entangled in material worldly affairs, even though he may remain in the world like an ordinary man. These are really important purports. And because it's explaining who is actually a real devotee. Now, we have examples like Tukaram and other people who are not interested in my and mine, or aham mameti, I, me, and mine. They're interested in Krishna and serving the Lord. And they're not greedy. They're very selfless in the sense that they're not always thinking about themselves. They're always thinking about pleasing Krishna. Now, a person who is like that, they get the protection of Krishna and the help of Krishna throughout their life. That's worth more than all the money you could make. Okay, so are there any questions about that? Any part of that purport? So a pure devotee of the Lord never thinks of himself as the proprietor of his home. He surrenders everything unto the supreme control of the Lord, and thus he has no fear for maintaining his family or protecting the interests of his family. Because of this surrender, he no longer has any attraction for wealth. Even if there is attraction for wealth, it is not for sense enjoyment, but for the service of the Lord. A pure devotee may be attracted to some accumulating wealth just like an ordinary man, but the difference is that a devotee acquires money for the service of the Lord, whereas the ordinary man acquires money for his sense enjoyment. Thus, the case for a worldly man, thus the acquisition of wealth by a devotee is not a source of anxiety, as is the case for a worldly man, and because a pure devotee accepts everything in the sense of serving the Lord, the poisonous teeth of accumulation of wealth are extracted. These are amazing statements. This is a whole different way of life. It's completely different than what everybody's thinking. Now, this is also explained in two other places. Well, explained in a lot of other places. But in the 9th mantra of Ishopanishad, let's see who wants to read it. You can read it. The 9th mantra of Ishopanishad. Mantra 9. Start from the beginning.
Ninth mantra. Okay.
Mantra 9.
Those who engage in the culture of nascent activities
That means ignorant activities.
shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge.
This is an amazing verse. So-called knowledge. That's what we have today, so-called knowledge. Whenever it says so-called, it means it's not real. It's something false. Go ahead. That's exactly what we have today. That's exactly what your kids are learning right now, so-called knowledge. Go ahead.
Purport. This mantra offers a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya. Avidya or ignorance is undoubtedly dangerous, but Vidya or knowledge is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. This mantra of Sri Upanishad.
So it's even more dangerous than ignorance. This amazing statement. In other words, the knowledge that they're teaching today is more dangerous than ignorance. Go ahead.
This mantra of Sri Ishopanishad is more applicable today than at any time in the past.
In other words, it's worse today than it ever was in the past. Worse today. That's why you have kids committing suicide. That's why you have kids taking a gun and shooting other kids. That's why you have kids, like little girls getting pregnant when they're 14, 15 years old and have to raise a child by themselves. That's why you have so many mental problems. Now they're saying 1 out of 4 kids is not sure about their sexuality. 1 out of 4. It used to be 1 out of 1,000,000. Now 1 out of 4 kids are not sure about their sexuality. That means that they're considering changing their sex, having an operation. This is crazy. It's never been like this before. Right? And okay, go ahead. Look that up. Look it on the internet. 1 out of 4 kids.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Huh?
I remember seeing that.
You saw that? But you didn't mention it.
It's basically the millennial majority of the millennials, as they say, which is the newer generation. They are 1 in 4 or something. They identify in this LGBTQ, that entire spectrum. Yeah, right.
You find it? Yeah? What's it say?
It says around a quarter of the high school students identify as gay, bisexual, or having more fluid sexuality, official data suggests.
That means your kid that's going to Skyline or one of these schools, 1 out of 4 kids in that school is identifying. Did it say they identify as?
Yeah, they're identifying as either gender fluid or explicitly gay.
Does that sound like a safe environment for your kid? I would say no. 1 out of 4 in the high school, right down the street. Well, how many of our kids are going to that high school? No, but
So
how many of
just-
our kids are going there? But do the parents understand this? Hey, your kid is going there, right?
Not yet, but she goes to finally, but it's same.
Well, okay, but she'll end up in Skyline, right?
Yes.
Now, is that something acceptable? 1 out of every 4 kids in Skyline is not sure about their gender or identifies with this, different, changing the gender or all these different gender positions. Is that acceptable? How about in India? Is it 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 40 or 1 out of 400? We should find out.
I was told that the cities in India are getting influenced, particularly the kids, but maybe not at the same rate as here. And as I was reading further, it says just in 2015, that percentage was 11%.
Where?
So, like the 11% of the kids had
Here?
this in US. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like from 11% it went up to 25.
Yeah,
24.
you know why? Because they teach it in school.
Yeah.
They support it.
And the incentives are also now tied to it. Like
Yeah.
college applications
Yeah.
are also tied to it.
And then corporate is also like, it's all like this chain. Corporate world is promoting all in the name of diversity and all. They're promoting all of this stuff, which means college also must ensure that they support the corporate, which means the schools are not supporting that, so that kids can go into that. So it's this pipeline.
They are so crazy. They are started using now. I was listening. So women pregnancy, they are saying start calling person pregnancy. So women pregnancy is not. So use call person pregnancy.
Everything.
That they don't want to call women pregnancy anymore. So it's person pregnancy, so that they are not offending anybody.
Yeah, they're very serious things. It wasn't like this before. Now, they're not making their quotas for American soldiers. That means they won't be able to man all the boats and all the airplanes and all the, let's say, all the different soldiers that they need to have the ability to fight a war. They only have right now about 1 million people in the army. I mean, how many people are in the army in China? You tell me. Look it up. Look it up. Look it up.
They're the largest star. I think Russia is the largest star.
Pretty soon, America won't be able to fight a war.
2 million.
What?
Yeah.
2 million around.
In China?
Yeah, active soldiers.
Okay, so they have twice as many as the United States. Now, who do you think would win a war between China and the United States? If it was a traditional war, the Chinese would definitely win.
Yeah, India is second. 2 million, 1.46 and 1.4.
Right.
I mean, from a percentage of the population, definitely US is high because US is 300 million people or 350 million people. Still, you have 1.4 million in army or military personnel, not just military personnel.
Yeah,
But-
those are
but
not
when-
the fighters. They only have about 150 to 200,000 real fighters. Everybody else is support.
But nowadays, the military warfare is also changed now, right? Now it's more cyber and just use one drone to bomb some.
Doesn't mean anything. You still have to have soldiers on the ground to win a war. You can't just win it by blowing up something. Okay, go ahead. Where did you leave off?
Yeah. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education, but the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect.
Would you agree to that statement?
Yeah. There's no element of any spiritual education in any of our education system.
Go ahead.
As far as Vidya is concerned, the first mantra has explained very clearly that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything, and that forgetfulness of this fact is ignorance.
So, do our kids accept that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything? They might theoretically accept it, but do they act like that? Do we act like that? Go ahead.
The more a man forgets this fact of life, the more he is in darkness. In view of this, a godless civilization directed toward the so called advancement of education is more dangerous than a civilization in which the masses of people are less educated.
Yeah, so it'd be better not to send your kids to these schools where they can learn about LGBTQ, XYZ, who knows what. It'd be better not to send them because they're not being educated. What does it say? What does this verse say? It says that worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. It's worse than what? Those engaged in the culture of ignorant activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. This culture of so-called knowledge is worse than being tamasic and completely in the mode of ignorance. It's worse than that because they think they have knowledge, but the knowledge they have just puts them into anxiety, into some kind of a strange consciousness where they can't even figure out what their gender is. It's very interesting how these things happen. And this is America, the United States of America. It was never like this before. Okay, go for it.
Of the different classes of men, karmis, jnanis, and yogis, the karmis are those who are engaged in the activities of
Where
sense.
are you reading from?
I'm reading the third paragraph, Maharaj.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Of the different classes.
Of the different classes of men, karmis, jnanis, and yogis, the karmis are those who are engaged in the activities of sense gratification. In the modern civilization, 99.9% of the people are engaged in the activities of sense gratification under the flags of industrialism, economic development, altruism, political activism, and so on. All these activities are more or less based on satisfaction of the senses, to the exclusion of the kind of God consciousness described in the first mantra. In the language of the Bhagavad Gita 7.15, people who are engaged in gross sense gratification are mudhas, asses. The ass is a symbol of stupidity. Those who simply engage in the profitless pursuit of sense gratification are worshipping avidya, according to Sri Ishopanishad. And those who play the role of helping this sort of civilization in the name of educational advancement are actually doing more harm than those who are on the platform of gross sense gratification.
There you go. Now, Prabhupada, when did he write this? Like 50, 60, 70 years ago. He's right on. It's more true now than it was then. So, go ahead.
The advancement of learning by a godless people is as dangerous as a valuable jewel on the hood of a cobra. A cobra decorated with a valuable jewel is more dangerous than one not decorated. In the Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya 3:11-12, the advancement of education by a godless people is compared to the decoration on a dead body. In India, as in many other countries, some people follow the custom of leading a procession with a decorated dead body for the pleasure of the lamenting relatives. In the same way, modern civilization is a patchwork of activities meant to cover the perpetual miseries of material existence. All such activities are aimed towards sense gratification. But above the senses is the mind, and above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul. Thus, the aim of real education should be self realization, realization of the spiritual values of the soul. Any education which does not lead to such realization must be considered avidya or nescience. And to culture, such nescience means to go down to the darkest region of ignorance. According to the Bhagavad Gita 2:42 7 and 7:15, mistaken mundane educators are known as Vedavadarata or Mayaya Prata Jnana. They may also be atheistic demons, the lowest of men. Those who are Vedavadarata pose themselves as very learned in the Vedic literature, but unfortunately they are completely diverted from the purpose of the Vedas. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, it is said that the purpose of the Vedas is to know the personality of Godhead. But those Vedavadarata men are not at all interested in the personality of Godhead. On the contrary, they are fascinated by such fruitive results as the attainment of heaven. As stated in Mantra 1, we should know that the
So these
personality.
are the karma yogi, the false karma yogis. They're interested in good karma, to be elevated to the higher planets, to enjoy better sense gratification.
As stated in Mantra 1, we should know that the personality of Godhead is the proprietor of everything, and that we must be satisfied with our allotted portions of the necessities of life. The
You know
purpose.
what's interesting here? These are not my opinions. These are opinions of Srila Prabhupada. Some people say, "Oh, Hari Vilas is too gung ho against modern education." No, it's not me. This is Prabhupada. I'm simply repeating what he says here, right? So we should understand where this is coming from. It's coming from the parampara. Do you think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would be happy to hear that 1 out of 4 kids in a high school is confused about their gender? He was against modern education also. Even then, in the 1920s and 30s, it was already nonsense. So we have to understand the importance of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This had nothing to do with all this nonsense that's going on. It's against it. And we have to decide, do we agree with this or we don't agree with it? Because if we take it as a joke, then we will become what's called a sophist, a person who talks something but doesn't really follow it. Right? Okay, go ahead.
Maharaj also, but in the Shastras is also written that this is how the decline of this yuga is going to happen, right? Where all these values will get eroded.
But there are 10,000 years where it's not going to decline. It's supposed to give everybody a chance to get out of this process of birth, death, old age, and disease. This by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, there's a 10,000 year window where you can become liberated. So why should we give up? Why don't we do something that is, let's say, okay, here's the point. We cannot do what Ron DeSantis is doing. It's called culture war. We don't want to have a culture war. What we want to do is what Lord Chaitanya did. Have very ecstatic Harinam Sankirtan, not just once a week, every day, and distribute large amounts of prasadam and books and get people chanting and dancing. That's not a culture war. We're not criticizing people. We're giving people a chance to experience transcendental happiness by chanting Hare Krishna and dancing and feasting and having festivals. That's what our mission is. We're not here to criticize this one or that one. We have to understand Prabhupada is explaining what are the pitfalls in modern society. Okay, but now what's the solution? It's not a culture war, because war is, again, it's dividing people on sides. We want everyone to feel transcendental happiness. This is what we have to discuss. This is what we have to be convinced about. And if we become convinced, then we're going to take the measures to do it. Just like we were convinced, in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s, we go out every day on Sankirtan. You give everything else up. Just go out every day on Sankirtan and chant and distribute prasadam and preach. And then that's when the movement was at its most dynamic, progressive state. It grew very, very quickly at that time, for about 10 years. It's still growing today, but that, wherever they're doing massive Sankirtan and prasadam distribution, things are growing. And then doing festivals and things like that. So this is where we want to go. It's not to create a war zone. That won't solve the problem. The solution to the problem is Harinam Sankirtan and prasadam distribution and joyfulness. Okay, go ahead.
The purpose of, continuing in the middle of that paragraph, I think it's the fourth paragraph. The purpose of all Vedic literature is to awaken this God consciousness in the forgetful living being, and this same purpose is presented in various ways in the different scriptures of the world for the understanding of a foolish mankind. Thus, the ultimate purpose of all religions is to bring one back to Godhead.
See? To bring one back to Godhead. Not to create a war. Yeah. To bring one back to Godhead. People will go wherever there is happiness and peace and love. It's a magnet. It doesn't matter what gender they are. And we can see gender is fluid. But if we create an atmosphere of love, peace, happiness, it's going to attract people. And that is our technique. That's Lord Chaitanya's technique. It's not creating a war. Okay, go ahead.
But the Veda Vadarata people, instead of realizing that the purpose of the Vedas is to revive the forgetful soul's lost relationship with the personality of Godhead, take it for granted that such side issues as the attainment of heavenly pleasure for sense gratification, the lust for which causes the material bondage in the first place, are the ultimate end of Vedas.
They are promoting something which is completely wrong. and they're acting as if it's Vedic. Just like if someone says Manava Seva is Madhava Seva, that's completely wrong. It's opposite. But yet they're saying that. These are the Veda Vadaratas. They think they know the Vedas. They don't actually know the Vedas. They're teaching something that's against the Vedas. Go ahead.
I just lost the. Okay. Such people misguide others by misinterpreting the Vedic literature. Sometimes they even condemn the Puranas, which are authentic Vedic explanation for laymen. The Veda Vadaratas give their own explanations of the Vedas, neglecting the authority of great teachers, acharyas. They also tend to raise some unscrupulous person.
That's Satguru.
They also tend to raise some unscrupulous person from among themselves and present him as the leading exponent of Vedic knowledge. Such Veda Vadaratas are especially condemned in this mantra by the very appropriate Sanskrit words Vidyayam Rataha. Vidyayam refers to the study of the Vedas because of the Vedas are the origin of all knowledge, Vidya, and Rataha means those engaged. Vidyayam Rataha thus means those engaged in the study of the Vedas. The so-called students of Vedas are condemned herein because they are ignorant of the actual purpose of the Vedas on account of their disobeying the acharyas. Such Veda Vadaratas search out meanings in every word of the Vedas to suit their own purposes. They do not know that the Vedic literature is a collection of extraordinary books that can be understood only through the chain of disciplic succession. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master in order to understand the transcendental message of the Vedas. That is the direction of the Mundaka Upanishad 1.2.12. Those Vedavadarata people, however, have their own acharyas who are not in the chain of transcendental succession. Thus, they progress into the darkest region of ignorance by misinterpreting the Vedic literature. They fall even further into ignorance than those who have no knowledge of the Vedas at all. The Mayaya Partha Jnana class of men are self-made gods. Such men think that they themselves are God and that there is no need of worshipping any other god. They will agree to worship an ordinary man if he happens to be rich, but they will never worship the personality of Godhead. Such men, unable to recognize their own foolishness, never consider how it is that God can be entrapped by Maya, his own illusory energy. If God were ever entrapped by Maya, Maya would be more powerful than God. Such men say that God is all powerful, but they do not consider that if he is all powerful, there is no possibility of his being overpowered by Maya. These self made gods cannot answer all these questions very clearly. They are simply satisfied to have become God themselves.
There, simply satisfied to have become God themselves. Whoa. Yeah. So here we see the a dilemma. This is so whenever it says Veda Vadarata, it equals Maya Aprita Jnana. So there are four types of people that never come to Krishna. So let's look at that. Look it up. 7th chapter, I think it's 15th verse. What does it say? What's it say? Namam Deskritina Mudha. So you have the Mudhas, the Naradamas, the Mayaprita Jnanas, and the Asuram Bhavam Asrita. So the Mudhas are ass-like people. The Naradamas are highly educated, but they use their education only for sense gratification. The Mayaprita Jnanas are people who are so-called experts in the Vedas, but have complete false understanding of the Vedas and propound false ideas based on the Vedas. And then you have the then you have the Asuram, the Asuras, completely against God. So the Veda Vadaratas are on the same level as the Mayaprita Jnana. People who are so-called Vedic experts but actually are nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about. So here we are, this gentleman that you were talking about yesterday, Praduna. Right? Muslims are converting people, and this thing and that thing. Yeah, what are you doing to stop this? What is he doing to stop it? Nothing. He's just complaining. Right? The Prabhupada explains, I'll show you where that quote is, that people who just complain but don't do anything practical are nonsense. I mean, you can complain all day long. Does that solve a problem? Just like your wife could be complaining all day long, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Right? Does that solve the problem? No. So just complaining all the time but not doing anything to improve the situation is nonsense. So that's what people. So are we doing anything? Yeah, we're doing a lot of things. How successful is it? Well, that could be criticized. We could do a lot more. Let's put it like that. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? So here you see, we basically just read number 6, right? 3, went over it. We had already gone over it yesterday. And then it led to the mantras 9. And then we didn't have a chance to read the next one, which would be the 9th chapter, 11th verse. We'll do that tomorrow. And then go on to text 7. So are there any questions? You see how Prabhupada has discussed the problem and the solution years ago. We're still trying to do catch up to figure out what he said and how to actually implement it. But, devotees are implementing it in different degrees. But are we convinced enough to implement it completely? That's the problem. Okay, no questions, so then we'll stop right there. Thank you. You see how Ishopanishad is a very powerful book. It's short, but it's very powerful. Everything's there. And he's saying it's better to be less educated than more educated.
I think that is why some 50 years back India was good.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagati Sadma Bandha Mohi Savadhana Mate Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhava Toriya Jai
Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoy te. Guru mukha padma vakya chitete koriya kya. Arna kori ho mane asha. Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati. Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha. चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो. प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते. वेदे गाय जहाँ रचरितो. श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आधम जनारा बंधु. लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना. हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया. ए बेजास घुषुक त्रिभुवाना. प्रभुपाद पतित पवाना. जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashata Deshadarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. See, our spiritual masters are the only way by which can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection that fulfill all desires. He